What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every one of the weapons in Cold War's multiplayer. And in today's episode, we're going to be covering the brand new LMG with Season 4. This is the MG82. And starting it off as always, let's have a look at our base damage, which is 30, 25, which means this is going to be a 5 to 6 shot kill. It's also worth noting there are no separate body multipliers, but that's pretty normal for Cold War. And now let's get into headshots, where we get a 1.4 times multiplier, which is pretty standard for LMGs, and this gives us a headshot damage profile of 42-35, which means at any range, it's going to take you 3 headshots mixed in with body shots in order to get a kill. And therefore, headshots just aren't very good with this LMG. I wouldn't bother aiming for them unless, of course, you're going for camos. As for our rate of fire, this is very fast at 909 rounds per minute. This is actually the same as the FFAR. And what this means for our time to kill potential is up close, it's going to be 264 milliseconds, which is a very fast time to kill. It's not the fastest in the LMG category, but it is quite fast. It will be competing with SMGs. And then beyond the maximum damage range, we get a time to kill value of 330 milliseconds, which for long ranges is actually a very solid and competitive time to kill. So just in general, this gun has quite a bit of killing potential and power, which is what we would expect out of an LMG. But next up, let's have a look at our bullet velocity, which is 603 meters per second, which is fairly standard for LMGs. Obviously, it's faster than the RPD, though. And then let's get into our range value, which unfortunately is not very good. It's only 19 meters. But like I said, that 330 millisecond time to kill at longer ranges, that's still a competitive time to kill. So even if you end up beyond this damage drop-off point, it's okay. This gun is still going to perform just fine. But you can also see with the various barrels what they do to your range values here. Some of them will be reducing our ranges, other ones will be increasing it. And then when it comes to suppressors, we obviously see decreases to our range values. Then getting into hardcore game modes, our maximum damage range is our 1-shot kill potential. Anything beyond that's going to be a 2-shot kill, even if you're using the barrels that boost your damage. So just keep that in mind. This gun isn't really that great in hardcore modes. Obviously, you can use anything in hardcore modes and still be successful. But if we're looking at this compared to other guns in hardcore, it's just not great. But then let's have a look at our Hipfire, and as you can see here, our Hipfire is incredible with this, just like with all of the other LMGs. And when you combine that with the fire rate of this gun too, hipfiring is an incredibly effective strategy. But then getting into idle sway, we can see here when aiming down sight, there is a little bit of movement, but it's not that bad at all. And now let's have a look at recoil. And I'm just doing 30-round recoil tests here, and it does kick pretty quickly and pretty strong upward and to the right, and then it corrects itself and cuts pretty strong back to the left. And while the overall magnitude might not look that bad here, in practice, this kicks pretty rapidly upward and to the right at the beginning, and therefore at longer ranges, I actually find that I have a bit of a hard time staying on target for those initial shots. And I would go so far as to say that this is the least accurate LMG in the game, and it doesn't really excel at long ranges because of this recoil. But then let's get into our handling stats. For our aim down sight time, this is 583 milliseconds, which is technically the fastest in the LMG category, but this is still very slow when compared to assault rifles and SMGs. But then we have our sprint out time, which in-game, our stated sprint out time is 450 milliseconds, but that doesn't align with what you actually experience in the game. It's more like 317 milliseconds. So while this isn't a fast sprint out time, it's at least not nearly as bad as it looks on paper. But then getting into our reload ad time, this actually has the slowest reload time in the entire game at 7 seconds flat. This is a very, very slow reload time. And therefore, many of you will likely want to use one of these magazine attachments that either boosts your magazine capacity or boosts your reload time. And finally, for base stats, let's get into our movement speeds, which are all standard for an LMG. They're not that great, especially while aiming down sight. You are practically locked in place, but that's nothing new. That's kind of to be expected with any of the LMGs. So with that, let's just recap the strengths and weaknesses. For this gun's strengths, one of the biggest strengths is its amazing hip fire potential, especially with that fire rate. It's really good in that area. It also has a very solid time to kill, and technically it does have the fastest aim down sight time in the LMG category, even though it is still quite slow. As for weaknesses though, this does have fairly high recoil that can be a bit difficult to keep a handle on. Also, it's got the slowest reload time in the entire game, and then finally, its range value isn't that great. So this gun is definitely more of a close-range LMG. It's not really designed to excel nearly as much at long ranges compared to other LMGs. But now let's move into a couple of the unique attachments that I want to talk about here, and these are the Task Force and Division barrels. With both of these barrels, they boost our actual damage value by 10%, and what this means is it doesn't actually affect the number of shots to kill to the body at all, and that applies to core as well as hardcore game modes. Even at long ranges for hardcore modes, it's still going to take you 2 shots to kill with these barrels. However, the benefit they do provide is it now just takes 2 headshots mixed in with body shots instead of 3 at any range in order to reduce the number of shots to kill. And I would say when it comes to the Division barrel, this one increases your recoil, so I wouldn't recommend using the Division barrel at all. However, with the Task Force barrel, if you are going to be using a barrel on this gun, this is the one you want to go for, just because it has a couple other great benefits like doubling your damage range as well as a noticeable increase to our bullet velocity. And this one doesn't come with any recoil downside. And with that, this is a great place to move into my recommended attachment combinations for this gun in Cold War's multiplayer. And let's start it off with a gunfighter setup. This gun definitely benefits from having a lot of attachments on it. So with this one, we're going to be using the Cobra red dot, just because I like this red dot. It's a nice balance between somewhat higher zoom with a red dot, but I also don't like a lot of the super high zoom optics, because then it hurts this gun too much up close. Then we've got the Agency Suppressor, the Task Force barrel, which like I said, that is the best barrel to be using on this gun. The Steady Aim Laser to give us even better hipfire than this gun already has. We've got the Field Agent Grip to help with that recoil a little bit. The Salvo 150 round fast mag, just because this gives us a great magazine capacity because we burn through mags quite quickly with this high fire rate, but we also reload quite quickly. Then we've got the Airborne Elastic Wrap, and then finally the Raider stock. And with this, I've just found this gives us a nice overall balance of stats for a closer to mid-ranged LMG. Our 5-shot kill range is 32 meters, which is definitely better than the base. Our bullet velocity is acceptable at least for those mid-range fights. I wouldn't use this at extremely long ranges at least. And then we've got a pretty decent balance of aim down sight and sprint out time. So when it comes to an all-arounder, that is a great way to run this gun. However, the next setup I wanted to share for you guys is a little more specialized. This one's designed primarily for hip firing, because like I said, that's one of the big strengths of this gun. So we're going to be using this fairly up close and personal. With this, we got the suppressor so we can stay off the radar, flank our enemies, and get ourselves into those up close and personal situations. We've also got the Steady Aim Laser to help with our hipfire spread, and I know I could be using the 5 milliwatt laser, but I just don't want to hurt our aim down sight time too much. I realize this is primarily a hipfire build, but there will of course still be situations where you want to aim down sight, and I find the standard Steady Aim Laser does more than enough to keep a nice tight hipfire spread. But after that, we've got the Bruiser Grip just to help with our overall movement. That's definitely beneficial if we are trying to run around the map and be hip firing. And this one's great compared to some of the others because it does help with our shooting movement speed, which is great for hip fire. Then we've got the standard fast mag on this just so we can reload a little bit faster. And then finally the Marathon stock to help a bit with our sprint to fire time without hurting our hip fire accuracy at all. And with this one, our range value is pretty terrible, but like I said, this is primarily a hipfire build. Our bullet velocity doesn't really matter since we're playing up close and personal. Our reload add time is noticeably better than our base reload time, which is nice. Sprint out time is very manageable, and then our aim down sight time is quite slow, but like I said, we're not going to be aiming down sight too often with this particular setup. I'm primarily going to be trying to hipfire. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's gun guide on the MG82 LMG. Personally, I don't think this is a terrible LMG for multiplayer, but at the same time, I just don't think it's amazing, unlike its performance in Warzone. Of course, that is just my opinion. I'd like to know in the comment section below, in Cold War multiplayer, what do you think of the MG82 LMG? Also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, of course, I will leave a link to the playlist in the description down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.